Okay, we're now live. Good afternoon or evening or morning, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our Divergent discussion with our special guest, Caitlin Hughes. For those who don't know me, I'm Michelle Ridsdale. I'm the founder of Caboose. Before we get started, I just wanted to let the audience know that you can drop questions into the chat and we'll be monitoring those as we go. And if we have time at the end, we'll be able to have some of you call in. So I would like to introduce Caitlin. Some of you will know Caitlin from various social media posts, I'm sure. Caitlin is an accredited mental health social worker, neurodivergent-affirming therapist, researcher, and podcast host of Divergent Dialogues. Autistic ADHD and part of the LGBTQIA plus community herself, Caitlin brings both lived and professional experience to her work. She specialises in supporting autistic folks and ADHDers through her private practice, cathartic collaborations, and is completing a PhD focused on autistic mental health. Caitlin is passionate about social change, tailored therapeutic care, and fostering inclusive, affirming spaces for neurodivergent individuals. Very impressive bio there, Caitlin. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, to kick us off, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you and your journey and what led you to start cathartic, a trip upward there, collaborations.
Yeah, don't worry. I know it's a bit of a tongue twister, that name. Sometimes I go, why did I pick that name? And even sometimes when GPs ring me for a referral, they ask me how to spell it as well. So, yeah, don't worry. I forget how to spell it too.
Good. Okay, good. I should have said it 10 times before joining.
Yeah, like one of those tongue twisters. Anyway, so but yeah, thank you for the intro. I thought it was really interesting when I was asked to do this topic and the first question, because a big part of why I started my business was actually because of burnout. I'd been working full time, so it was the first time in my life I'd worked full time for about 2 years. And the context I was working in was pretty hectic, but I guess I just got to a point where I was just feeling really run down. This was actually before I was diagnosed autistic and ADHD, so I had no idea what was going on. I was looking around at everyone around me and everyone else seemed to be coping okay, and I just felt like I was drowning. And for me, I felt that the best thing that I could do was start my own business so that I was better able to meet my needs. I didn't know they were neurodivergent needs at the time. It just kind of started off this journey for me, I guess getting to understand myself a lot better. I started working with a lot of autistic ADHDers, just seemed to kind of come into my practice. And I seem to really vibe and work with like autistic ADHDers, and I started going, what's going on here? This is really odd. And then because I figured out that I'm in fact an autistic ADHDer. So yeah, it's just one of these weird things where obviously going through burnout is something that's really challenging, but it led to something really great. So kind of a full circle moment.
Amazing. It sounds very similar to my journey starting Caboose and not realising I was an ADHDer as well. And just started really vibing with all of the community and the people like yourself. And so it's interesting how it does come full circle. So burnout does get thrown around a bit in our community, particularly for ADHDers and autistic folks. But it hits us differently, I think, to neurotypicals. How would you describe neurodivergent burnout in your words?
Yeah, so I think something that is really important to validate around autistic and ADHD burnout is just how much it impacts not just our brains, but our bodies. It's not like a typical burnout that, say, someone who's not neurodivergent would experience. Maybe they can take a weekend off and then they're feeling a lot more regulated and a lot more calm. So I describe it as, so essentially it's a state of physical, emotional, and cognitive depletion. A lot of my clients describe it as like they say they're like a couch potato or like a burrito. They just have to have lack of sensory input, and it's really challenging with their executive functioning. So it's essentially your nervous system is shutting down, and it's our body saying, "Hey, like this is too much. Like I'm really struggling right now," and so my reaction is I'm kind of going to go into this shutdown. And for a lot of neurodivergent folks, we have to navigate a lot of additional challenges that other non neurotypical neuronormative folks don't have to. So it just accumulates, and then we kind of end up in this shutdown state.
That's interesting. So it's more than being just a little bit tired, I guess. Then it's you know that sort of physical sensory overwhelm. Can you break it down a bit more for us in terms of like, for example, what would it feel like, these sort of early signs?
Yeah, so I mean, I can obviously speak to my experience of burnout, but also the clients that I see. So people often experience a lot of physical symptoms. So might be chronically exhausted, struggling with sleep. A lot of people get like headaches and migraines, and like a lot of like neck and shoulder pain. Just this constant sort of headache that's just there, and you can't seem to get rid of it. Also, increase challenges with sensory issues, just having a very low tolerance for that. I know for myself, even just like having a shower, just having the water touch my skin, it's just too much. I can't cope with it. Also, emotional challenges as well. So, might be feeling a bit more anxious, easier to stress, might be having a bit of a low mood, and also cognitive issues going on as well. So difficulty concentrating with memory, decision making. So I kind of describe it as it's kind of like trying to push thoughts through mud or cement. It's just like you can feel your brain, it's there, but it's just not connecting the dots either as quickly or at all sometimes. So really brain foggy. As you can see, that there's a lot going on and there's a lot of signs.
It sounds that there's a lot, and I think back to when, like, I was feeling quite burnt out, just sort of around the time of starting Caboose, with my kids being unwell, and you finishing a job and starting Caboose, and it felt like that. It felt actually like it was really hard to concentrate, and I think then with the ADHD jumping from thing to thing, I felt almost like it wasn't so much like like if I laid down, it would go away. It was just like this state of being
Yeah.
all the time. And the sensory thing like really resonates with me as well. I think when, even on a day when you're feeling overwhelmed, actually having, that sort of break from the light and talking to people sort of think, oh yeah, just say hi at the end of the day. And it's like, well, actually, no, I can't speak.
Yeah.
You've talked about in your in your blog about pacing and like as a key strategy, but that's can be really tricky. I know for myself, everything is moving quickly,
Yeah.
and there's always demands, whether it's family or your partner if you have one, and work. Like what does a sustainable pace strategy really look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I guess something that I did for myself and also with my clients is I do something called spoon mapping. It's essentially a very autistic way of kind of going through all the things that you do in your life on a daily basis, and getting a bit of a gauge of how many spoons. So, like with spoon theory, I would assume that a lot of people probably know about it, but essentially, it's people that have chronic health issues. Essentially, at the beginning of the day, they just start with a lot less energy. So, spoons kind of signify energy for us, and a lot of autistic ADHD is like obviously just fundamentally being neurodivergent, there can be challenges, but often we do have co-occurring like medical challenges and chronic fatigue and all these sorts of things as well. So sometimes going through that and having a little bit of a sense of that can help us to get a sense of areas where we might have a little bit more wiggle room, or things that we might be able to essentially, I guess, like let go of a little bit, or find some strategies and accommodations to maybe make it a little bit less overwhelming. So something that can help in terms of pacing is, I know for myself as an ADHDer, I'll just kind of go from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, and won't have any breaks. I'll forget to drink, I'll forget to eat. So sometimes just having a little bit of buffer time, so that you can take some time to regulate and rest a little bit, can help. So even if you've still got a lot of things to do, just taking a little bit of time in between can really help. Sometimes it is important to, I guess, prioritize what is necessary, especially based on your capacity, because, even if you do kind of have a sense of, your spoons and how much energy things take you, our capacity tends to fluctuate. So, on some days you're into all that hyper focus and you're having a great time, and other days, as I said, you're like a couch potato or burrito and you don't want to get off the couch. You just want to sit there and watch reruns or something. So ideally, it is helpful for us to have some flexibility in our routines. I understand that doesn't always, life doesn't necessarily allow for that. But sometimes it's just looking at those small ways where we can take a little bit of that burden off us all the time, or, get some support or have that little buffer.
Great. I like that concept of spoon mapping, and I wonder, like, do people try and do that sort of together? Like, do you try and find somebody that's kind of a spoon buddy to do it with, or do you tend to do it by yourself, just mapping it out?
Oh, well, so yeah, so it's an activity that I use with my clients. So I have a
Oh,
little,
cool. Okay.
I have like I actually wrote a book about how to handle burnout, and it's one of the activities in there, and we just kind of go through systematically, like all the kind of usual activities that they do in a day-to-day basis. It's not an exact science by any means, but it just helps for people to have a look and go, wow, I'm actually doing a lot, and I'm actually working and living way outside of my capacity. Because, like as an ADHDer, like I'm completely time blind. So I'll just do all these things, and then I'm like, yeah, and it's like, oh, what did I do today? I can't even remember. And, even if we don't have this present awareness, our body and our brain is still going to get really tired and fatigued.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I mean, we kind of all, as a neurodivergent individual, we want to kind of say yes to everything, and we think that we can do more. I'm certainly guilty of that, where I'm like, oh, yes, I can do that, and yes, I can do that, and yes, I can do that. And then all of a sudden, it's that, yeah, laying on the couch at the end of the day, unable to communicate to anybody. So why are boundaries, so hard to set, and how can we get better at setting them and sticking to them?
Yeah, so this is a big challenge for a lot of neurodivergent folks, and yeah, there's a lot going on there contributing to this. Often, a lot of neurodivergent folks blame themselves for these challenges, but it often starts for a lot of people really young. Like, we live in this neuronormative society that puts all of these expectations on us, and even from when we're really young, our family, or at school or wherever, I guess there's certain ways that we're expected to conduct ourselves, in society, at school, or wherever that is. And, so I guess a lot of particularly autistic folks, we interpret that really literally. Like, I know for myself, I did. And it's kind of like, okay, well, this is the bar, and that's the bar that I have to meet every time I do this, or, every day, or whatever that is. And the times where, I wasn't able to, kind of meet this bar, other people may have had issue with that. And then I wasn't sure how to cope with that, and deal with those situations. Or sometimes people might have acted in a way that was really challenging and not helpful, maybe a little bit mean, and quite invalidating. So when you've gone your whole life not having support in, when you do identify your needs, or you do kind of share that, hey, like, I can't do this, or hey, maybe I'll need this done a little bit differently. It can be really challenging to advocate for yourself when you've just had all of these times where you've just been invalidated and shut down. So often as we grow older, particularly like late diagnosed folks who, like, we had no idea that we were neurodivergent, so we didn't even know that that was a reason for some of these challenges, we'll tend to mask a lot of these needs. So we'll just say yes, 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 yes. And even when we want to say no, sometimes we might not have the confidence or know how to kind of navigate that situation for fear that someone might have a really negative reaction. So setting, I guess, learning about your own boundaries is a really big thing. So if people, I guess, on this call are thinking about, oh, boundaries, like, this seems really scary, like, it is something that a lot of people do struggle with, and it does take a long time and practice, and that's okay. It's an evolving thing. So I guess it starts with being self-aware of what your boundaries are. A lot of us neurodivergent folks, we've never even had the space to think about that. Like, oh gosh, like what are my boundaries? I'm so used to kind of doing what other people want or masking my needs. So I guess that's the number one, I guess, thing that you need to do. And often when we start doing that, we realize that there's a lot of things that we do that are actually really draining. And if we're completely honest with ourselves, we don't actually want to do them. So, that might be social events, or, going to shopping centers on the weekends, or whatever that is. So that really helps. It can also be helpful to practice setting boundaries or saying no with trusted people. So if we start with the people that we feel more comfortable with, then after we gain some more confidence in that, then we can kind of branch out with other people that maybe we are feeling a little bit less confident with. And it's also really important to remember that, boundaries they're not selfish. They're not selfish. It is for self-care. And it's really important, especially when, we are prone to burnout. It's kind of our, responsibility to be able to, make sure that our needs are met so that we're not constantly having these cycles of burnout.
I think that's, yeah, so many things I go, oh gosh, growing up, you're always saying yes, growing up, and you do learn, there's kind of learned behaviours, I suppose. And I also wonder how that kind of links to that people pleasing part too, because I know myself, it was kind of like, yes, you should keep doing that, and that, I should do this, I should do that. And it's not until you are diagnosed and you have a bit more confidence to say, okay, well, actually, it's okay not to want to go to that networking event this week, and it's okay to go, actually, that's really early in the morning, it's going to mess with my morning routine and set my day up, for a bit of a disaster. So I think you can start to practice it, as you say, in a safe way. I sort of think also for, for those who are parents, certainly for my kids, I've seen that people pleasing element, particularly with my daughter, and that's sort of led to other mental health, mental distress, because she felt like she was letting people down when you say, you can't, or you end up being unwell, because that's a way of getting out of doing it.
Yeah.
Have you seen that with your clients as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, really not wanting to let people down, holding themselves to a really high standard. And just, I think, especially as an adult, you have to think as a young person, their world is much smaller. So to say no to their best friend, it's huge, especially when they've never really done it before. So I think just really validating those feelings is really important. But obviously still, supporting that process. But yeah, it can be really heartbreaking, and sometimes people aren't accepting of that as well, and then that can be even more challenging to navigate as well.
Exactly. And have you seen, like saying no to people, that sort of makes me think about the work situation where we're kind of, asked multiple times by, managers or colleagues to do something. And sometimes when we say no, there's negative impacts. Have you come across any strategies that help in that situation where you kind of say no to a manager or to, somebody where it matters at work?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my strategy was to leave my job, but
Yes.
but I mean,
Me
that's
too.
but obviously,
It's
practically, that's
radical.
not always possible. Yeah, it was. Yeah, everyone was like, "Oh gosh, what are you doing, Caitlin?" But I will say though, my manager at the time was lovely, so I just want to, in case, he ever
Yes.
listens to it.
Same. Yes, exactly.
But yeah, anyway, there's other stuff going on. But so yeah, that's not always possible. Sometimes it can be about finding an ally in the workplace. Even if they're not able to help in a practical way, just having one person that you trust that you can share what's going on for you. And I guess depending on the workplace and the sector, sometimes, particularly often you may need an official diagnosis, but and obviously it can be challenging to disclose, and there's pros and cons. But sometimes you can request reasonable adjustments, and things like that. We have laws around these things, but again, it's like it's hard for you to say no to your best friend. um, how
Yeah.
are you going to go up to your boss and go, oh, hey, have you read the Disability Discrimination Act?
Yeah.
Can I have my accommodations? But, there are these things in place for, to empower people when they are in these, I guess, challenging spots. But yeah, your mental health and well-being is number one. So yeah, often people need some kind of support,
Support. Yeah.
external support, to kind of work through that. Like, some of my clients, we, work through that.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's a great, topic for discussion, and perhaps another divergent discussion down the track on disclosure. One of
Yeah.
my passions, having a HR background, so I'm
Oh,
very
okay.
passionate about
Yeah.
disclosure in the workplace and how we set people up for success in creating those inclusive environments. I think it's interesting when you start to talk about disclosure and saying no, not just because of your sort of boundaries, but when it comes to burnout, how do we kind of think about letting our people know within our teams or within our the manager group as well? How do we kind of let people know that actually, there's an amber flag here, and let's make sure we talk about those things. So
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
you talked a bit about masking, sort of perhaps it growing up, particularly for those who are late diagnosed, and that kind of leads me to think about that sort of internal ableism. I'm not sure if you think about them as the same thing or different, but we'd love to hear a little bit more about internalized ableism.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think internalized ableism is a big driver for masking. So essentially, internalized ableism is when you start believing some of these negative narratives that get thrown around about autistic folks, ADHDs, other neurodivergent folks as well. And yeah, we really take that on. And we internalize that, so we can have ableism where that's kind of coming our way, and then there's a point when it becomes in that internalized process. So often the way that this shows up is we may have a lot of self-blame. So for some of our challenges or some of our needs, we may feel like that's like a personal failing, or we're purposely being difficult, or something like that, rather than acknowledging it as a genuine need, and feeling a lot of shame for that. So for needing that or for asking for that. And that can result in a lot of masking and overcompensating. So going above and beyond to not just show up, but also try and hide the fact that we're struggling. So we've got that, kind of double load. a lot of people sometimes will overwork or do extra because they may not have a lot of feelings of self-worth. So their self-worth might be tied to their productivity, which, makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, in our capitalist society, a lot of worth is wrapped up in productivity. And for us neurodivergent folks, often productivity is something that we struggle with because of our fluctuating capacity, or, if we're experiencing burnout as well. So yeah, it can kind of feed into this burnout cycle, because if we are, I guess, embodying these, ableist narratives, and we aren't open to receiving support, and we're pouring out a lot more than what's coming in, you can kind of see how, it's leading to that burnout. Not that it's our fault, because there's that kind of external pressure as well. So it is a process of unlearning, identifying maybe when some of these thoughts or feelings pop up in ourselves and in our day. And something that I found really helpful is, connecting with other neurodivergent folks, whether that's, can be through content or social media or in person. And just knowing that, I'm not alone. There's other people out there that have these struggles. Like, these struggles are valid. I'm not just making this stuff up. And also just having a lot of self-compassion for myself. And that can be really hard. Having, for myself, obviously I'm a therapist, so, compassion to others, great. But yeah, sometimes having that for ourselves can, be really challenging. So, but yeah, it does take time, and it's okay that it's a bit of a process. But yeah, it's unfortunately something that a lot of us carry with us.
I can see, as you're talking, these, massive links between all of these topics, this ableism, this working harder, we must do these things. I know for myself, I was always, told in my HR career, oh, yes, you can do that job and you can do that job and you can go on stage and talk to hundreds of people. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, well, why can't I? Because I get so nervous. And then, it's sort of this vicious cycle, right? Then you make yourself try and do things that you're not comfortable with. And then you're kind of getting burnt out and you're taking on more. And then, you're kind of not pacing yourself at all. And then you're saying yes all the time and the boundaries come into play. So just in that, 20 minutes, I'm like, oh yes, there's a lot of unlearning to do there.
Yes.
I
It's like a
like
script.
your yes. I love the suggestion about connecting with others. Hence, I mean, I'm obviously the founder of Caboose, and that was one of my motivators to start Caboose, was really so that neurodivergent individuals could meet other neurodivergent individuals. And everyone is such at a different age and stage of their journey. And so being able to find people who've been there, whether it's, as a parent or as a late diagnosed or newly diagnosed, it just, I think, helps, and it certainly helped me and my family on the journey.
Yeah.
That's one thing I suppose we can do, is, to unlearn. But are there any, like, have you seen anyone do this really well, where they've been able to unlearn in a short space of time, or do you think it just takes a long time to do it?
Honestly, it just takes a long time to do it. I mean, so I've had my business for 3.5 years now, and I would say majority of that time, and I would say before that, I was kind of going through this process, and I would say on some levels I'm still going through that process. So, it's kind of like this onion, and you peel back the layers and you peel back the layers and you peel back the layers, and it gets smaller, but that you something happens and you're like, oh yeah, like, that internalized ableism, there it is again. So yeah, I think sometimes people I feel a bit frustrated with the process of, oh, I thought that I knew this about myself, or that, I figured this out, or I did this. But, like, as I said, these are narratives that we've been told when we were super young, like babies, toddlers in school. And as adults, it takes us a lot of time to unburden these things, and discover these parts of ourselves that maybe have laid really dormant because we've just gone, oh, well, I'm just not going to, think about that because that's really challenging. So yeah, short answer is, yep, it is a process. It is a process, but I would say that a lot of people, it's a worthwhile process. It's challenging but worthwhile.
That's great. I think as a late diagnosed person myself, I thought I knew myself pretty well. I thought I had great self awareness, and it wasn't probably till I kind of hit some burnout and started kind of questioning, things for myself, and then having a diagnosis that I've got really curious, and I found that actually, for me, unlearning has been about being curious. Like, so when I'm feeling unsettled in some way, or like, I've got that sort of brain fog, I sort of am more curious about what's going on. Or if I've got those kind of that unsettled feeling in my stomach, or someone says something and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. I'm much more curious, and also I'm more aware of my tiredness and that sort of risk of burning out. So
yeah, definitely. I think something that a big learning for me throughout all this process has been that there's a big difference between my ability and my capacity. So I think a little bit before you're talking about how you're like, oh, well, I can do all these things, but I can't. And it can be really confusing. So just because we can do something doesn't mean we should, based on our neurodivergent needs. So yeah, it's a journey for sure.
yeah, I think, that's a great way of putting it. And I often think about that sort of capacity piece, because I also felt that as I hit burnout, my ability to do things was actually, my cognitive ability, as you were sort of maybe talking about at the start there, was definitely less, because I just couldn't hold as much in my head. So, yeah. For people who are in a deep burnout, what are some of the first things that they can actually do to help themselves, I guess, especially if they don't have any formal supports? I know, we're very lucky that, you're a psychologist, so you've educated through this process. I've, learned a lot through my HR journey and my children's journey with their mental health. So we've had access to these supports, but what about for people who don't?
Yeah. I just want to clarify, I'm an accredited mental health social worker, not a psychologist, just so I don't get like cancelled or something. That's okay.
Yes.
So
Okay, good.
not a psychologist.
Good point.
That's all good. Yeah, so in terms of what we can do, well, it really comes down to doing less. And that can be really hard, especially when we've got this internalized ableism in there going, hey, you've got to do all these things, you've got to be really productive. But it can really be about like going back to basics, really prioritizing sleep. I always say sleep is like one of the pillars of mental health. If we're not getting good sleep, then everything else is going to get super wobbly. Making sure that we're, drinking, eating, if we're looking, when we're that burnt out, it's our body screaming out to us for help and support. So we need to try and nourish it as much as possible. Also incorporating some little practices in order to, I don't know, give us a little bit of energy, and that can look different for autistic folks and ADHDs, and I mean just everyone in general. So for some people, doing something a little bit energizing, even though it takes a little bit of effort, it gives them that energy. Whereas for others, it might be something that's a little bit more calming. So for myself, like I have some like mindfulness practices that I use, that just really short ones, like 5-10 minutes. And sometimes that just helps to calm down my nervous system as well. And my favorite is, like like having a weighted blanket, or having this like really lovely sensory input that's really calming. So a lot of my clients, they'll kind of like wrap themselves up on the couch just to kind of get that calm. Um, and yeah, we can kind of create low demand environments. So it can just be sitting in your room with dark with a weighted blanket on, and maybe just watching your favorite TV show. It's it's really difficult because often what happens is that people, obviously, we need to work, we need money, we need all these things, and people keep pushing, and then it gets to a point where they don't have any option anymore because their brains and their bodies have really shut down. So ideally, burnout it's much more effective to cope with when we put preventative measures in and start doing these things sooner rather than later, because I can tell you from experience, willing your way through it, unfortunately, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's taking those opportunities, even at the end of the day, to try and, you know, whether it's laying on the couch watching reruns of Modern Family with a weighted blanket and a pet or two,
Oh yeah,
if
my
you have
cats. Yeah.
pets. I, I think that's really good, and I liked your reference to it's not a one size fits all. I know some of us like mindfulness. For me, it's more about doing something, whether it is giving the dogs a cuddle or even doing some stuff on Caboose. For me, like that's what I love doing, and so it doesn't seem to be a chore. I also love getting out to nature, and I often talk to people about, did you know how many greens there are in a short walk in the park? An oldie but a goodie. So I wonder if anyone in the audience has any other tips. Feel free to drop them into the chat so that we can learn from each other, and we'd love to hear thoughts. I guess the other question, as we sort of talk about like tips for burnout, is how do family, friends, even the workplace? We sort of talked a bit about workplaces, show up better for somebody going through burnout, and how does support actually help there?
Yeah. So I think the first step is to really deeply listen to the person, and not don't minimize their experiences. Like as I said, this isn't something that they can will their way through, and family, friends, workplaces, you can't will it through for this person either. So and I guess the other thing is people will kind of jump in and try and fix whatever it is. Okay, what can we do? Let's try and fix this. So it's really about listening to the person. As you said, being curious, going, okay, how are you feeling? What's going on for you at the moment? And making sure that we're really validating that person, their feelings, their experiences. It can help to offer practical help. So, as I said, we don't want to be going in there giving people like 20 million options, but sometimes offering meals or errands, or just kind of letting them know that you're there if you want to have a chat, but no pressure. So sometimes just thinking of ways to take things off their plate in a practical way can be really helpful, because often for a lot of people that are burnt out, the thought of cooking a meal, it's way too much. So these little things can feel really big and really helpful for a lot of people that are going through burnout. Something that's really important to consider as well is to respect that person's social boundaries, and the fact that their sensory overwhelm and sensory differences may be increased. Obviously can be really challenging when, you have a friend or a family member that you really want to catch up with and you really miss them, but they're feeling really burnt out. It's not that they don't want to talk to you, it's not that they don't love you, it's not that they don't care, it's just that they literally just don't have the capacity at that time to be able to, be in a conversation, or just, even for myself, sometimes when I'm really burnt out, just being in the same room as another person and their nervous system is like enough for my body to go, oh no, this is too much. So, or even like the, what is it, the air conditioner blowing on my skin. I'm like, oh, I can't deal with it. So yeah, just really respecting that and understanding that. In terms of workplaces, yeah, I agree. I think that could probably be a whole other discussion, because it's, yeah, there's a lot going on there. But um, I think at a baseline, if you do identify an employee who's neurodivergent that's struggling with burnout, or they kind of come forward, it is really important to be open and curious and not sit in judgment and expectation. It's not that the person doesn't want to perform whatever it is. It's because they can't at that time. So um, sometimes there are workplaces that can be flexible and collaborative and understanding, and it might help that person to kind of get out of that period of burnout, and then moving forward they have like preventative measures in or things in place to help for that not to kind of reoccur again, or there's mechanisms in place. But putting more pressure on someone that's already feeling like that, it's not going to have a great outcome for anyone. But so yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think happy employees make great employees that do great things. And I guess we live in a society where flexibility is something that you need to consider in a workplace, not just for neurodivergent folks, just in general. People have busy lives, and all these things go on. So,
Exactly.
but yeah, I think that's a big topic. So I'm not going to
It's a
unpack that
huge
too
topic.
much.
No, we could go down a rabbit hole there.
Yeah.
I know personally, again, with my HR sort of professional hat on, what I found is you get more out of people and more motivation if you're supportive of, any kind of, family or personal issues, and it's having that sort of empathetic approach, I think. But as you say, we could definitely go down a rabbit hole with that one, that's for sure. I know when I look back to my experience, again, when my children were in hospital, a friend came over unannounced from 20, 25 minutes away from where I live to bring soup. And it was the best thing that anyone could have done for me at that point in time, because people can offer to do things and do groceries or give you a gift voucher for a massage or something like that. But actually, the practical thing of bringing something that I could eat when I got home from the hospital or take to the hospital was just, a beautiful thing. I struggle personally with asking for help, and I wonder, like, when you're in burnout, you kind of need the help, but as a neurodivergent person, I think we struggle asking for help. Do you have any thoughts or tricks on that one?
I'm just thinking, getting like what are they called, a whiteboard marker, and just writing help
Oh,
with an
yes.
exclamation. That's a
I
joke.
love it. Yes.
Um,
Yes, we need little signals, don't we? We need, like, I used to use that with the kids, just have a little
yeah,
like emoji or a symbol to say, actually,
yeah,
I
I
need
need help.
some extra support.
Yeah. So I think, like, similar to the boundaries, I think starting with asking for help from people that we're closer with, or are more trusted people, starting there and then building up from that. Because and it's a bit of a muscle. Like, when we're so used to saying yes to others, it's really hard to think of saying yes for ourselves. But yeah, it's so important. So I guess I acknowledge that it's challenging, but yeah, I think it just starting in your comfort zone and then growing from there. Also, sometimes just even before you ask for help, having a think around, if you've got the cognitive capacity at the time, have a think around maybe specific things that you feel comfortable with people supporting you with. Like for myself, like especially with food and things like that, I'm really picky in particular because of my sensory issues. So sometimes being a little bit more specific can help that person to be able to help you in a way that's going to meet your needs a little bit better as well.
Okay, that's great. Great advice. Thank you. You use radical acceptance a lot in your work, which is awesome. I love radical acceptance and radical candor in the HR world. What can you tell us? Sort of, what does that mean in the context of burnout and being neurodivergent?
Yeah. I think radical. I think it comes with the social work territory, but maybe also it's a bit of an ADHD thing, like just not really doing things by halves. So yeah, I do I do like a bit of the radical approach, but I think when it comes to burnout, sometimes that's kind of the antidote to a lot of these, a lot of that internalized ableism, a lot of the pressure that we may be experiencing from other people externally. So it's really about honoring your current capacity, whatever that is, on a day to day basis. And sometimes that requires us to be a little bit more flexible. Like for myself, I like to be quite organized and have plans. And even if my own plans don't go to plan because of me, that's something that I struggle with. But just having that in mind that, sometimes things might need to be a little bit more flexible based on our capacity. And also not having judgment for that. Like, obviously there's things that we need to get done, we need to prioritize. But, sometimes I'll go to myself, oh my gosh, like I've got to get this done. And then I stop and I go, do I really have to get it done today? Like, is it really going to matter if I do it today or tomorrow? And I'm like, no. But we just, feeling this internal pressure to do that. So giving space for that. And also just letting go of shoulds. So, I should do this or I should do that. In in my opinion, like people shouldn't have to be in such a level of discomfort and distress, you know, and be participating in something. So it might be a no or it might be no, but if we can do X, Y, Z, then, maybe I'll be able to, find a bit of a compromise or a way that you can engage in whatever it is, the activity. Sometimes it is about, accepting, like, I think something that a lot of that for myself and a lot of my clients struggle with is this frustration of like, why do I have to deal with all this extra stuff that like other people don't, like, people that aren't neurodivergent, like, why do I have to do this? And, feeling that anger and that frustration. And I totally get it. Like, and I think that's part of the process. I think sometimes we go through this big grief when we, especially if we're late diagnosed and we find out, we go through this grief and this anger and all this sort of thing. But at the end of the day, when it comes to radical acceptance, it's about going, okay, well, if I accept things as they are and I accept myself as I am, I'm neurodivergent. And that means that I am going to have to navigate life a little bit differently and that my capacity is going to be a bit different and change. So, it's not a click of the fingers sort of thing. It does take time. But at the end of the day, we're neurodivergent. We're in our bodies. We're in our brains. We're here. So I guess it's about figuring out how to make the best of it and, and not just survive, actually be happy and joyful and enjoying life. So, I guess it's about trying to cultivate a life that is more aligned with our needs, as opposed to adjusting and masking and compensating so that we can fit into, particular relationships or workplaces or society at large.
It's the perfect example of neuroaffirming. I think when I think about radical acceptance, I think about, well, a couple of things. That some community members I've been talking to in Caboose recently who have been really struggling with being neurodivergent and maybe they haven't had that sort of a neuroaffirming approach to their upbringing or to their therapy and have felt, really kind of like wanting to fix themselves. And I love that approach of being accepting. And I always like to think of it as, we think differently, and there's so many strengths. And that's not to say that there aren't challenges. We've just talked about a few, but yeah, that acceptance of oneself and our place in the world. And I think back to when my son was growing up, and he's now 21, and it's only now that he's starting to really, I think, accept his neurodivergence in a more positive way, and getting to know his brain for himself instead of through his family. So thank you, for that lovely radical acceptance. I'll definitely be keeping that one in mind. So for anyone listening right now who feels really burnt out and stuck, what would you want them to hear most? What's the sort of key takeaway for them?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few when I reflect, but I think something that's important to remember is that rest is actually productive. Sometimes people are like, oh, if I just, do that extra little thing, or do whatever this is. But, when we are being more mindful and, putting that buffer in and having that rest time, it actually, gives our nervous system a bit of a reset. So, I guess I'm giving you permission to have rest and to tell people, hey, this is productive. Like, I'm not being lazy or whatever. Like, this is actually for my well-being, and this is really important. I'd also want to say that, you're not failing at life. It might feel like that on the inside, that you can see that a lot of people are able to do X, Y, Z in a way that they may be appearing that they're not struggling as much. But, unfortunately, we do live in a world where it doesn't always consider our needs. And that takes effort on our part to be able to understand our needs so that we can have those met. I think another thing to consider as well is that, as we've talked through this session, a lot of these things, that they do take time, and there aren't, I guess, quick fixes for these things. And sometimes just having that patience and self-compassion for ourselves is really important. We don't have to figure it out all right now. And especially when you're burnt out, you're definitely not going to be able to figure it all out. So just taking just starting small with those, with those boundaries, or with, asking for support. And over time, cumulatively, these things will build, and you'll grow, and you'll have a better understanding of yourself and your needs, and be able to navigate things with less challenge. And I think another thing to think about as well is that, we all deserve compassion and understanding, and that's for ourselves as well. So self-compassion and self-understanding. And it's okay to take time to get to understand your neurotype and yourself, and invest that, because it does, pay dividends into the future for sure.
It sure does. Being curious. Stay curious. So before we head into our wrap up, I wonder if there are any questions in the chat. Let me pop in here. So a couple of questions here. How would you go about communicating burnout to a potential employer? Sorry.
Ooh. Can I have more information? No.
I can jump in here too.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, you're probably the better person to answer this question.
Look, firstly, I think you need to have an ally. So either it's somebody at work, as we talked about, or a good relationship with your manager is, important to be able to have these conversations. So really being able to sort of go for a coffee or go for a walk and talk. Sometimes I find that with people who are struggling, I go out for a walk, let's get out into nature, have a walk and talk. And it takes that sort of pressure off people to be really looking at you when they're talking. So I think, and then I guess, letting them know maybe a little bit about burnout and how you're feeling. So, and what you actually need. So again, talking about what you need rather than, what everyone with burnout needs, because I think people hear that word and they don't necessarily understand it. So giving them some context. Someone says here, yes, people aren't so great at taking no for an answer. I think that's really true, and I think it's a sign of a true friend when you can say, I'm not really feeling up to it today, and and the friendship is still there. And I think having neurodivergent friends, that really helps because people get it. Rox has said, when I'm done, I need to find the cleanest room in the house, no mess or doom piles, yes, and scroll on your phone or just watch a TV show or just sleep, yes. For me, it's laying on the couch and turning out the lights and maybe watching TV or just sitting there in the quiet. Someone else says, my go-to is lying in the dark in the room, doing a crossword. That's awesome. I love that. Or going to a local park, looking for birds, if you have the spoons to do that. Perfect. Bird watching is such a great pastime, I think. There's some comments about the birds, and yeah, your birds are the best. I agree. I was talking to someone just recently who is now, there's an official term for it, not just bird watching, and I've forgotten what it is, but I'm sure someone in our community might know. There we go. So if there are any other questions, pop them in. Otherwise, I'll get Caitlin to tell us where they can find your writing. You mentioned about a book before, or connect with cathartic collaborations, or if they want to keep exploring burnout, where can people head?
Yes, so I have a website, www.catharticcollaborations.com.au. You can give me a bit of a Google. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Yeah, I don't know. There's a few others, but I think they died.
Yes. Yes, what was it? It was Twitter, X, something. I've got all of them and I keep forgetting what they're called.
Yeah. So I co-host a podcast called Divergent Dialogues, which is funny because I'm like Divergent Discussions, Divergent Dialogues.
Yes.
Yes. And so that's on Substack, but also it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the places where you can listen to podcasts. So there's a few episodes. There's a blog about burnout, and there's a few episodes about burnout as well. And we also talk about like workplace. There's a bunch of topics there.
Great. Amazing.
On my website, I do have a course called How to Handle Burnout, and I also have like a workbook as well on my store there if anyone's interested in, I guess unpacking a little bit further for themselves.
Great. We will pop all of those resources into the Burnout Tribe, which will be set up in Caboose, so we can keep the conversation going, and we'll pop Caitlin's resources in there. You'll also receive a feedback survey after this from our fantastic community engagement manager, Rox. We'd love to get your feedback so we can keep bringing you more of these divergent discussions. We do have a couple more coming up. We have a free one, which is actually about rejection at work. So thinking about, feedback and getting feedback from your manager at work, and that's with Yen Perkis. And we also have another free one coming up shortly, which is with Carla, our resident psychologist, on masking. So anyone tuning in might like to join that. You'll see that also in the Caboose app. And a great conversation. Thank you very much, Caitlin, for joining us. And thank you to all the community members who've joined us today. And we hope to see you again very soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Caitlin.